I'm Lennox Samuels, and you're watching Belizean Legends.
This is Belizean Legends, and I'm Bilal Morris. Today we will be speaking with an outstanding Belizean journalist. I say Belizean because Lennox Samuels, right here, has his spectrum is very broad. Because we will hear from him today why is it that it's very hard to put him inside, and I say that in quotes, Belizean journalist. But Lennox Samuels, for me, from hearing this brother, is an international journalist. This is an international man. And we want to bring you the Belizean Legends audience. This incredible story of a personality that I have been looking for quite a few years. I mean, I've been looking for this personality. We are not trying to bring Lennox Samuels to you as a sort of a special type of feature, but we want to show our viewers internationally and in Belize itself that Belizeans are large people. They are people who are big. Though a small country, we transfer this knowledge, this beautiful knowledge called Belizean, across the spectrum. I mean, if people would see this man and what he has accomplished, we would know that this person has taken that little thing called Belize and has put it as a powerful image across the world. And for that today, I want to welcome you, Lennox Samuels, to Belizean Legends, my brother.
Glad to be here.
Yes, man. I want to just go straight into it. And speaking with you off the record in terms of all the dynamic things that you have done in journalism, I want you to give our viewers, how did it all started? You talk about this young man that came from out of the shores, of people would say the jungles of Belize, and then exploded on the international spectrum. Talk about how it all started for you, Lennox.
I think it started really the way most of these adventures start, which is the sort of upbringing you have, which is the GCEs and the O-levels and A-levels, and I was always expected to do very well. I was expected to do spectacularly well, I suppose. I was kind of a natural student and absorbed information by osmosis, and so I tended not to study very much to the chagrin of my father, who his idea was that I would come first every term. Second was unacceptable. And so I did not do nearly as well on the A-levels as everyone, the whole country had anticipated. I was supposed to win the Open Scholarship. Instead, I did rather mediocrely. I was out probably the night before the exams at parties. And at that time, I was really big, like a football hound, and lots of girls, and school, in equal measure. And I didn't feel particularly compelled to study that much. So, long and short of it is, I ended up with a less than prestigious scholarship to Wisconsin, a Jesuit school called Marquette University, where I ended up getting bachelor's degrees in English and Western European history, and then settled into, kind of by accident, a master's degree in journalism, and that kicked off my international, my journalism career, which ended up taking me into numerous countries around the world. But I started off as your typical reporter, covering general assignments and fires and traffic accidents and traffic jams, and city hall and school board meetings and all that stuff, and then graduated from there and moved from Wisconsin to Texas, to the biggest newspaper in Texas, and started off as an investigative reporter there in Texas, and eventually rose to being the sort of number 3 person in the newsroom, which was deputy managing editor, and did a variety of news executive roles, and then sort of got bored with sitting at a desk barking out orders, making lots of money and driving fancy cars and things like that, and decided that I wanted to go back into the field of being a reporter, and went off to run the Mexico office of the Dallas Morning News. This was the Dallas Morning News in Texas, and I was the Mexico bureau chief in Distrito Federal, Mexico City, for 3 years, and I was off and running, and then I moved into different publications. Do you want me to go into those?
Before you do,
I don't want to. We don't necessarily make this a resume, a recitation.
Very much so.
I mean? Yeah.
I want to sort of stay within the Belize confines for a moment, because I don't want you to just go yet.
Yeah.
In terms of that, you talk about the GCs and the advanced levels and the Cambridge
That's right.
exams. I mean, Lennox in those days, those were the distinguished type of academics. Our parents were so very much strict when it comes to or putting in time and studying. You talk about how you were a natural, you just soak up information very easily. You were one of those types that there was so many Belize you hear talk about it that I never had to really do a lot of studying, just a natural. And we see people like you, Belizeans like you, who make the young Belizeans who look at this kind of feature very proud, in terms of there's a pride there. That when we see that there are those from that country that have gone abroad and have made it big within the academics and have become, Lennox Bailey here in Belizean has become an outstanding journalist with this kind of epic kind of accomplishment that you have made. I mean, that's what this story is about, because I think you are the first. I don't think that there has been, I know that there has been. We talk about Samuel Haynes, who in the 1921 went to Philadelphia with the United Negro Improvement Association, and Marcus Garvey was a journalist, but he was not a trained journalist. We know Philip Goldson, who edited the Billboard and like that, but Lennox Samuels, for a lot of Belizeans, have been the first Belizean that have ever came from out of that country and have made it big
to that level. I think that's
in
true.
international journalism, American journalism. I mean, you have transcended all aspects of journalism per se. When I hear your resume and your repertoire is so large, but what is it that you think that went into us with that British farm education, right? What is it that you think made Belizeans, and particularly Caribbean blacks, stood out in terms of accomplishments? Because Caribbeans, blacks, scholars, I mean, I could go down and list it, the accomplishments. What is it that you think that we were able to take out of that British form of education and make it work for us, though it wasn't native?
I'm not sure I would emphasize the British part so much, but I would say this, that we came out of a milieu, a backdrop that was obviously British, that valued education, but it was, I don't know that was driven by the Britishness. It was driven by Belize people who were interested and determined to take advantage of that British education that was provided, given the colonial situation, and where the value systems of the colonizer and the colonized sort of blended together. I think in America, for example, there's a comparative laxness in how the children are raised. Just as an example, one of the things that really put me off and struck me when I arrived in the States was how children spoke to their parents. Ma, get over here!
Manners.
I mean, there's a basic respect, manners, and expectations from your parents vis-a-vis their children, and this notion of of raising your voice to your parents and saying, I don't want to go to school, or I don't want to do this. My own girlfriend's child now quit school unilaterally at 14, and she, the mother, didn't seem to have anything to say about it. And she said, well, what would have happened in your case? And I said, well, if I had told my parents that I were quitting school at 14, after I picked up my teeth from the floor, I would be going back to school.
Absolutely.
You know, there was no discussion about what do you mean you're quitting school. And so there was a value placed on education. And I think it's, to your point, it's not atypical of sort of the Caribbean diaspora, not just Belize, but there is this value. India, for example, Pakistan, a lot of these former British possessions have that orientation. And so for me growing up, certainly my father, I got caned once by my father because I came in second in my class.
Listen to that, Belize.
And he says, you come first, and second is unacceptable. And especially when he found out that a large part of the reason had been that I was skipping classes to play football at St. Michael's. And he said, we will not have this again. You know? And in retrospect, I mean, you know, kids might be resentful and so on, particularly, and I understood where he was coming from and why he was pushing me. And again, I was a natural academic. Through St. Michael's College, I was adept at all like 9 languages. It didn't matter if it was science or geography or history or English or whatever. I mean, typically 1 or 2 in the class, you know, without any particular effort.
Generally,
it was kind of a brain power sort of thing. And then as you know, went to 6th form, and you have to choose something. So I sort of settled on the arts rather than the sciences, and I went from there. But I think Belize at the time, I don't know about now, was a cauldron of ambition and educational achievement and prowess and ambition and drive and this notion that that children must excel and that children must do better than the parents. And even if it was just your parents saying, you know, I worked in a shop, or I worked as a night watchman, you will work in an office. It didn't have to be anything highfalutin, like a doctor.
No matter what, just excelling whatever.
You must do better than we did, you know. And there was that definite drive, and I always knew, no question, I always knew that I would do well. How well? Well, that was up to
a sense of confidence.
Yes, that was up to how things turned out. But I knew I was going to do well somewhere. And I think at the end of the day, like many Belizeans at that time, you know, sort of Anglo-Belizeans, I assumed I would end up in England and I would go to Oxford or something like this, and either go home and help with the country's development or stay in England, which was the path.
Which we want to talk about too. I want to stick a pin there.
Next, you talk about your coming out of 6th form, SJC 6th form, which is a Jesuit school, Catholic school, and going to Marquette. What was that like? Because that is very unprecedented in terms of the story that goes behind that. How did you do that in sort of transferring that body of knowledge from there into that big world, United States?
I'm going to tell you something that most people don't know, which is, as much as I was known for brain power, if you like, I ended up going to a Jesuit university on a football scholarship.
Wow.
You know, I was not any kind of known varsity football player, but I had become quite good at St. Michael's.
Yes.
And so somehow...
Football, Americans call today soccer.
Soccer.
Yeah.
And as an aside, I refuse to conform to the usage of soccer. Global football is global football, and I don't see why I should be corrected as people have tried to correct me and say, "Oh, you mean soccer?" No, I mean football.
Yeah.
You mean whatever it is you people play.
Yeah.
So, but there was a chancellor, retired president and current chancellor of Marquette University, affiliated with SJC Sixth Form, and organized this athletic scholarship for me in Wisconsin. Now I arrived there and I'm prepared to play football and so on, and I find out that Marquette University is a huge NAACP basketball school and didn't give a hang about soccer, you know. And so it was given short shrift, and so I in that way I unfazed, I went into the bursar's office and I said, I'd like to switch to an academic scholarship, please. Not understanding that athletes in America are supposed to be stupid, and you know, you take basket weaving and speech courses. And she said, "Young man, you know you have to keep a 3.5 average, don't you?" And I said, "Okay." She says, I've got to be clear, you have to keep a B plus average to become, to switch scholarships from athletic to, and I said, "Ma'am, what is, I don't understand what the problem is. My current GPA is 3.795. She said, "What? Are you sure you're an athlete?" You know, and she looked it up and she says,
"You got the grades."
Okay,
back it up.
And I was off and running, and ended up getting the BA and then the MA, and off I went. And
interesting.
And actually, that was a time when I didn't have any justification for getting American permanent status. I was just some student. Right? I went to work for the Wisconsin newspaper, Milwaukee Sentinel. And apparently they liked me so much. I was pretty good, you know. And the executive editor went with me to immigration and says, "We are petitioning for this young man to join our staff on a permanent basis. And he needs a green card and work permit and all that." And I remember the conversation. The examiner said to the executive editor, Harry Sonneborn, wonderful man, dead now, he said, very cynically, he says, "You're telling me that in the entire country of the United States, this fellow is the only one who can do this job?" And without missing a beat, the executive editor said, "That's what I'm telling you." Way out on a limb, because of this, anyone theoretically could be a reporter. Right? And even so, the examiner said, "Well, you're going to have to go back and advertise this job so that Americans have a shot at it." Yeah. And long story short, they put in a little ad like this, a few people can see it, and I ended up getting the job, and that was the beginning of my career. And in fact, they were very upset when I ended up being recruited by the Dallas newspaper and left. But I left for good reason, because I found out, typically again in industry, not just journalism, that even though I was at that time entertainment editor and special sections editor, and I didn't have fiduciary responsibility. In other words, I didn't know what people earned in my own department. So I hired an assistant who I learned a year later was making more money than I was, considerably more. And I was outraged, and I said, "I'm leaving." And they said, "Oh, we can make adjustments," and so on. I said, "It's not the adjustment problem so much, it's just the lack of honor. Yes. And you should not have to be called on the carpet to make this situation right." So I left in a huff. And then went from there. Did very well in Dallas. I became this sort of well-known local personality and did all the high society events and all that, and ran into the usual sort of Texas racism, you know. But it never fazed me. It was just so much water off my back, and one thing led to another. I remember, as well as I was doing Texas in Dallas, I was bored much of the time. I started traveling heavily on my own time, on my own dime, and I had acquired this taste for large cities, you know, London and Paris and so on. And so I'm living in Dallas, which was a nice town, and all that, and I was just chafing because, you know, I ended up buying, became this shopaholic, you know, because you shop in Dallas. You know, they had this thing called the ladies' who shop, and so I used to tell people that I would get in my car, and the car would automatically take me to a mall. Because there was much else.
We have a car like that would be coming up pretty soon. They said cars will be driving themselves pretty soon, right?
And I would buy more clothes I didn't need. I had a massive wardrobe, and they started referring to me as the sort of Imelda Marcus of Dallas. I had 125 pairs of shoes at one point.
I was thinking of there, because when I saw you in 1981, right, coming to Chicago the first time migrating out of Belize, and I remember meeting you in Evanston, and you were at the Hall's residence, and you were dressed to kill, brother. You had a Sears cowboy boots with your jeans stuck in there, man, and you were really GQ. Yeah. You know, and I look at this dude, and I remember I had a background information to you because Calvin Flowers, one of your classmates from St. Michael's, told me about you.
That's right.
And I was saying, that is Lennox Samuels right there. That is the man right there. And I'll never forget, you said you were about to go cover a police concert. I don't know which paper you were writing for at the time, but you were about to go do that, right? And I was like, man, I would love to have been there with you. And I remember that's the first time I saw you, and when I got a glimpse of this image that Calvin Flowers had painted of this, in my mind at the time, was this giant in terms of your accomplishments that you just presently talk about. But what I wanted to say the next is, Belize talk about the brain drain, you know, and many of them people would look at that, government officials, and they would say, yeah, look at that, see? That's part of one of the brain drain right there. Look at why I was asked a question that why didn't they do it in Belize, and why did they have to do that out here? Why did Belizeans have to rise to such high standards in terms of all these things, and how come they couldn't do it there? It is a very, 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 very controversial question.
It is.
Because then most of the politicians at home use that to say that Belizeans who accomplished in the diaspora, right, were partly responsible for the brain drain. Why a third world country like that never did develop? We lost our best minds. Look at the Lennox Samuels, right? Awesome. In terms of accomplishment.
Simply.
How would you address?
I think that's a very good, reasonable question and concern. And it's a multifaceted response, and there is loads of blame to go around. You know, the first thing to talk about are opportunities. Whether we like it or not, there aren't many. There were not many when I was leaving 40 years ago, and they aren't now. And so I think there's a certain amount of irony and hypocrisy, if you like, on the part of officials, authorities in Belize who say, you know, these people go off and you never see them again. Some of that is true, but at the same time, I think the country does not offer enough scholarships, for example. It doesn't offer enough incentive to go and enough incentive to come back. I just described to you a situation that I sorted out. It wasn't Belize, it wasn't the government, and it wasn't any of that. It was something that I worked out with SJC, you know. And we need to be flexible enough as a country, we meaning Belize, where you don't let people fall through the cracks because they don't have quite the A levels.
Yes.
Because there are brilliant people who may not perform necessarily well on a given exam.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. They didn't study, they woke up on the wrong side of the bed,
people were more industrial, they learned trades better than...
So what we... And say, all right, you may not have done well on GCEs and so on and so forth, but you're known and have been known for some time as a person of great potential, which is how I was always looked at, you know. But I went off and fended for myself. To wit, halfway through toward the end of my first semester, the bursar's office said, "Oh, hang on, you know, we've screwed up. We have implemented for you a full scholarship of tuition, room and board, books and all that, when in fact you're entitled to tuition." So I actually left school because I didn't have the wherewithal to pick up the rest of it. And I went off to New York to hang about with my, to sort of work part-time with my brother who was working in burglar alarms. And then they called me back and we sorted it out. But there wasn't any help from Belize or anybody else or Minister of Government following up on me. And here's an important thing. One feels no particular obligation to return and do anything. It's not like one has received any help. You see? And it's not a bitterness, but there's not that imperative to return and say, well, you know, I owe the country, it's gotten me an open scholarship to Oxford or whatever, it's done this for me, it's given me a loan or whatever. And so what you do is very often the effect is for the country to effectively cut people adrift when they go abroad. And you don't have the umbilical cord is cut.
Yes.
And so you don't have that connection, you don't have that, what shall I say, you don't have that drive, that objective, I'm going to go back and help sort out my country. You know what I mean?
Bring me to the question, Lennox, not to cut you, but another question I was going with that as a precursor to what I wanted to ask you, because in this new time, many countries, developing countries, are looking at their diaspora for development. You talk about our governments or cut that umbilical cord, that whole connection, and gone. George Price was one of the first to say that. You know, that the Belizeans that went abroad...
I have a George Price story.
Don't really matter because they left. I mean, he was the architect of that very kind of mentality. Right?
It was a kind of a punitive attitude. You left, the hell with you.
Yeah, the hell with you. Right. And Lennox, you have covered various countries.
Yes.
And I know that you have seen where countries have used their diaspora to develop.
Of course.
Simply Jamaica is doing it right now.
India.
Right? As one who have a vast understanding of international relations and have traveled the world and have seen, have covered, have seen it with the naked eye, have seen things, have seen development, you have covered stories, news stories, you have seen how countries developed beyond your own home country, Belize. What would you say as an international man that comes from Belize? What would you say that Belize can do in terms of banking on its diaspora to help develop it, like Mexico is doing? How do you think that could be done?
I think it needs to start early, and we need to have a system, we meaning Belize really, of identifying who's studying where if they're not already affiliated with the government, and many aren't, and have a kind of a data bank, talent bank that says, we know that this talented Belize person, a person who emanated from Belize, is studying at Boston College or at the London School of Economics or at North Carolina State or wherever, and keep some kind of contact and tabs on that person, and so and you're offering encouragement and feedback and engagement, and you continue to say we hope you return, and we not only do we hope you return, but we want to help facilitate your return, and we want to talk to you about what it would take to bring you back, and what kind of resources and facilities and so on you need to bring into fruition what you learned. And sitting back and grumbling and saying, well, another smart guy left, or young lady left, and he or she has flown the coop and we'll never see them again, is not exactly constructive. Nor is flinging blame at them, the moment they got an opportunity, they turned the back of the country and turned into holier than thou, better than we are, and all of which I've heard, and then be prepared to offer the opportunities. To his credit, George Price, on one of my visits, I think it was 93, he actually sought me out and came to where I was staying in Belize City. It was quite a hullabaloo because the Prime Minister's entourage is coming to my house, and he came up the stairs, and we had a word, and he says, "What do you want? I mean, what do you?" And it was a really interesting time to talk to me, because I was at that specific juncture where I was trying to decide, what are you going to do with your life? Are you going back to Belize, or are you going to, in fact, specifically, are you going to go the distance in America and become a US citizen? So it was a very interesting point for him. And I said, I'm interested in the diplomatic service for Belize. Never told the story. And he says, well, we could sort something out. And he said, what strikes your fancy? And I said, I think I could do a good job looking after our High Commission in London. Now,
You would have been a perfect candidate for that.
I thought so. I thought I'd be very good. Obviously, there's a learning curve because I don't have experience and so on. But in terms of representing the country
As an ambassador,
well-spoken and well-informed, global knowledge, he said to me, that's promised a friend of mine.
It is Belize. You got it live and direct right there.
He said, might there be something else? And I said, not really. I think that's really what I would like to do, the Court of St. James's, and I think I would do very well, and I could acquit myself well and be a credit to the country and do things that would accrue to the country beneficially. He said, I'm sorry, I'm big supporter of the party, is slated for that spot.
Wow.
And he left, and I went off and took out my citizenship.
What else should you have done? He left, you left.
Well, I mean,
what would you?
I am not. You can't expect people to accept whatever leavings you want to offer them.
Yeah.
And I thought it was, look, one doesn't want to be an egomaniac or too arrogant and so on. But I was at this point a rather worldly fellow, and well spoken, and I knew loads of people, and I moved in those circles, and already in American politics and all that. And you want, it seemed to me, somebody of heft and stature, and you get some guy from wherever, boom, kind of whatever. And because he's been a part of apparatchik.
Yes.
And he gets the spoils. I think that there's a lot of that that's been going on.
Political cronyism.
Cronyism, exactly right.